Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Silver Screen Dudes YouTube channel. My name is Nico Luro. This is our ongoing series where I get to interview some of the brightest and best from across the film world. And today I am joined by the director of one of my films of the year. The review is on the channel now. We're talking about Protein, and I'm joined today on the channel by Mr. Tony Burke. Thank you so much for joining me, Tony. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me, Nico. Appreciate it.
So let's get straight into it because I know we're on a time scale here. When I finished watching Protein, because this was not at all the type of movie I was bracing myself for, I sat back in my chair and I thought, not since Dead Man's Shoes have I been captivated, like genuinely captivated by a grisly British movie. How important was it for you to get that grisly aesthetic through and to make the film feel quintessentially British?
Well, I think authenticity is the key to, the kind of storytelling that I'm into. And I think that can come from creating a grisly aesthetic. If you've ever been to South Wales, it's a glorious place, and there's a beautiful contrast between the rawness and the grittiness of the towns compared to the beauty of the countryside. And this was always going to be a gritty and quite grisly story, but I wanted it to feel real, not gratuitous. So it was really important to make it kind of a kitchen sink style film, make it very real, very relatable in the way we shot it, the way we wrote it. Just as important, because I think how those characters come to life in a very, very authentic way, in a very real way. The greatest compliment I have had making the film was, I think we were walking out of the Odeon Leicester Square world premiere, just drop that in, at Fright Fest, and a guy said, "This is great. It just feels so real. It feels like everything could have actually happened," and that was definitely the intention.
And it does. It's one of those things where characters like the one Craig played, you almost worry that there really are people out there like that, or sort of pseudo versions of those people. You turn down a dark alley, they could be either your best friend or your worst enemy, as the female protagonist found out. In her case, it benefited her knowing him, and as the gym bros found out, not so much. But it's how did you come up with this story? That's what I want to know. It's how did you go from a place of, so we've got a guy who's come back from doing his service, he's in Wales, he's gonna do some dastardly stuff, and it's gonna culminate with cannibalism, essentially.
Well, I mean, obviously we base this story has come along in stages. We made a short film version of this in 2013, and it was very much it wasn't the gangster kind of misunderstanding comedy gangster plot that it became. It was very much about a guy who, the simple conceit was, a traumatized ex-soldier can't afford protein supplements, so eats people who can afford protein supplements. Quite simple. We made a 15-minute short film, put it on the festival circuit. Craig was in it, obviously, and it didn't do that well. But we felt there was more in the story. But then obviously you have to work out, right, okay, if this is going to sustain 90 minutes and 3 acts, it needs a lot more meat on the bones, excuse that expression. Right. And then I don't know how it came to me, really. I just thought it would be great. I wanted this character to be sympathetic. It's a character that kills people and eats them, but you've got to want him to succeed. That's not an easy ask in cinema when drawing a character. Cannibalistic villains are normally the bad guys. Cannibalistic murderers are normally the bad guys. Right. So it kind of logically, it was like, well, maybe he eats bad people. And then I came up with this idea that he is returning back to Wales to try not to indulge what he has been indulging. So he's got a conscience. He has empathy. He's not a psychopath. He's trying not to kill people. And then certain circumstances arise that kind of trigger him, and he's back to his old ways. And there's always that kind of conflict in everything that he does. He knows he's doing wrong. He's trying to resist it. He wants to be a normal person. He wants to lead a normal life, but he's got those ghosts in his past that aren't letting him do that. And then we built all the characters from there. We created this fairly amateur night little crew of wannabe cocaine dealers down in South Wales on their first deal, and you know, randomly one of those guys ends up getting killed by our protagonist Sean, or Craig, and who plays him, and then all kind of chaos ensues as a result of that, through just men being stupid. Really, is the kind of driving force behind that, I think.
Yeah, right. That's kind of what I loved about it. Like, his cannibalism was almost like, you know, a little, you know, the snowflake that creates the avalanche, because it's like, it's, as you said, all these people are, they're not evil, but they're not good people.
No.
And you know, you do kind of paint them in a way where it's like, okay, well, you need to have your ass kicked a bit here. You don't think it's going to go to the level of you're going to be eaten.
No.
And then, you know, as you said, it just kind of cascades into this madness of plastic gangsters unfolding. And I actually thought that was one of the brilliant things about it, the way that you didn't show Sean as just he's bad. He does bad things, but he's not necessarily bad. He actually has a lot of humanity to him. And it's incredibly somber the way you ended the movie, with him kind of having gotten away with it and just on the lonely road again, almost like in the old Hulk series. And it's like,
totally. Or like a Western where the mysterious loner kind of drifts into town, causes chaos, and then drifts out again, leaving all that kind of havoc in his wake. I mean, he does do incredibly bad things, and we witness those on screen, and we don't pull any punches, we show it. But he also does some good things, and it's through him really getting to a crisis point where, and I won't give any spoilers away in the film, where he realizes that he's kind of crossed a line, that he realizes that he can't be normal, and he needs to repair some damage and help some people out before he once again sort of slinks off into the shadows, maybe to reappear somewhere else. So there's a lot of self-awareness there. So he's an interesting character. He's a still character. He's a quiet character. But what he does is he creates an incredible orbit around him from all those other characters. And when I wrote those characters, I'm a writer by trade, really. I've written all my life. I used to be a journalist, and I've written books, and I'm a writer in advertising and all that kind of stuff. The script is really, really important to me, and in particular the characters, because if you remember any great movie or any great TV series from the last 20 years, it's the characters, it's not the stories, right? David Brent, great example. You don't necessarily need to remember the stories in The Office to know that David Brent is the central character, and he's incredibly watchable. So, even though obviously tonally very, very different to Protein. But yeah, so I wanted to create and there's a lot of characters in the film, and I wanted to write them all properly, research them properly, create their own backstories. So when we actually came to filming, there was nothing too much left to chance. We knew exactly who they were, and we knew exactly how they were going to react, or the actors knew exactly how that character was going to react in the given circumstances of the film. And I think the thing I'm most proud of in the movie is the fact that, with the combination of the writing and the performances, I think that really does come across. I think we really kind of scored high on that.
I'd agree with that completely. Okay, I want to talk to you about techniques for making these types of movies, specifically the camera work, because what's the methodology for creating this, as you said, kind of kitchen sink effect, this feeling of being in a grisly, grimy area, being kind of away from main civilization while still having human characters in it, because it very much felt like a little microcosm where stuff was going down. And just like the banner we've got on our interview background now, shots like this where you've got the bathtub in the background, Craig looking the way he's looking. What's the techniques for giving this aesthetic to your movie?
Well, I think you've got to sit back and observe. I'm not a big fan of sort of flips and tricks when it comes to cinematography. I come from the advertising world where everything is very kind of technique based and transition based now over storytelling. And I think if you've got the right kind of pillars of storytelling in your film, you don't need to fall back on any of that. So I think you can just let the camera sit back and observe. I'm a big fan of doing things in camera. There was very minimal special effects on this. Andy Tuvey, who was the DOP, you know, we had a couple of meetings before we shot this, because don't forget it was all done over Zoom because it was during lockdown. You know, I sent him some references. I've always been a big fan of Andrea Arnold. I was always a big fan of like films like Fish Tank, you know, and Tyrannosaur that Considine directed. Just very, very bleak, very, very strong performances, incredible stories, great characters. Let the camera, just let people do their thing and just let the camera hang back and observe and give it time and space to breathe. I think it's, you know, it might sound like a cliche, but it's just about keeping it that simple. If you've got a good story, you've got a good script, you've got good actors, you've got good characters, you know, you don't have to overcomplicate anything. And as I said before, I want people to come away from this movie going, as you said, you know, there could be, you know, then my next door neighbor could be into this, you know, people hiding in plain sight. And actually, it's not beyond the realms of fantastical possibility. We hear about crazy stuff all the time, and the world gets crazier by the day. Yeah. So, you know, you watch a film like this and you go, oh, that's nuts. How nuts is it? You know, I mean, we talk about horror, but actually the real horror is in humanity. The real horror is in trauma. The real horror is in those secrets, right? So
100%.
That's what's playing out in this film. The horror isn't really people getting banged over the head with a hammer and sawed up in a bathtub. No. Horror is in day-to-day life.
Yep, 100%. The evil that people are capable of doing is so much scarier than any type of monster or ghoul or gore. Like, completely agree.
You know, and the scariest films are films where we actually think, you know, I'm not protected by a layer, but I'm not protected by a sort of a cushion or a layer of absurdity, say in like some horror films, you know, where that couldn't possibly happen, or supernatural horror. You know, it's like, this could happen.
Yeah.
So that is the scariest thing. And that's why things like, you know, Tyrannosaur and films like that just are so visceral. It's the horror of humanity, you know, that, you know, I mean, it's not particularly lighthearted, but it's important because, you know, we can't pretend that the world's a great place. Most of the time it isn't.
No, it's nuanced. It's grey. It's like this movie, you know, there's good people doing bad things and bad people who are capable of doing good things. And that's why I thought your movie worked so damn well, because it showed that nuance of people. As I said, I loved it. So you've kind of hinted at this already, but it may be a different answer. What is it that you'll always remember about being part of this movie, about creating this movie?
Well, I mean, obviously it's my first feature film, maybe my last. I don't know. So, I mean, as a life event, it's incredibly special. We made this film for next to no money. We've been very, very lucky. We've been reviewed in The Guardian, Little White Lies. Mark Kermode's had it on his podcast. People have said some really, really nice things about the film. But you can't get away from the fact that this is a film that cost £100,000 to make, which is a ludicrously small amount of money.
Tiny.
And when you've got a ludicrously small amount of money, you have to rely on a ludicrous amount of passion from the team involved. Making feature films is multi-dimensional. There's lots of moving parts. The fact that we did it as a group, and don't forget we still haven't been paid. You know, it was still it was still something we came to do. You know, art for art's sake, if you like, even though obviously the film has had a theatrical release and is on Amazon and Apple now. But, you know, it was just I think the whole experience of coming together to create something so huge and so full of jeopardy was very, very special. And secondarily to that, I'd have to say kind of spending a month in Wales was pretty special as well, because it's a scruffy, those towns are scruffy places. Like we were in Llanelli, South Wales, but the heart of the community, the heart of the people, incredible. It was really felt like home while I was there. And that's nice. Not something you get everywhere. So, you know, we talk about characters in the movie. Wales is a big character in this movie. And the Welsh have approved the movie. You know, they feel it represents them. They feel it represents Welsh people, the Welsh communities, Welsh places. So, you know, I'm very, very glad that they didn't say, "Oi, Englishman, what are you doing making films in Wales? You know nothing about it." We've kind of, you know, they've taken me to their heart a little bit.
So my next one you've kind of answered already, but I'll press you for any more. I usually ask people as we're wrapping up if they can share any great movies that maybe the mainstream public will be less aware of. You've mentioned Fish Tank, you've mentioned Tyrannosaur, any others that maybe will have directly or even not inspired this movie that you think are kind of hidden gems that people should see?
Yeah, do you remember Last Resort? Is it Pavlovsky? That was a great movie. Another Considine movie. Dead Man's Shoes is a movie that people compare this to a lot, I think, because there's an ex-squaddy and it's pretty grisly and it's set in the countryside, although that wasn't necessarily the intention. A movie that always followed me around, and I think that's the measure of a good movie, is when you kind of, or a good film, I should say, I'm not American, I should say, is, you know, when you wake up with it the following day and you can't shake it. And that was a film that always had a huge impact on me, was 4 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, which was a Romanian film about a illegal abortion under Ceausescu's dictatorship in Romania, which doesn't sound like a barrel of laughs, and it really wasn't, but it was an incredibly well-made film and a very impactful film, and well worth checking out. It won the Palme d'Or back in, I don't know, 20 years ago, something like that. So yeah, films like that, they're right up my alley. I'm not a big fan of special effects films, AI films, Marvel Universe films, Aquaman, all that kind of stuff. I can't relate to it.
Mainstream stuff,
because it just doesn't talk to me. It doesn't feel real. But you know, when you get incredible talent in front of the cameras, you've got a good story, and you've got a lot of good people that want this thing to succeed, I think that's when the magic happens. And you know, long live cinema, because we're entering a very, very scary time for the visual arts. And hopefully, you know, as people lean so heavily on technology, so people will want to go back to analog ways of making films and actually enjoy the rough edges of films like these, films that have been made for not much money, but with a lot of love.
Well, if that's your feeling, then I encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because literally the slogan on the top of my channel is "Long Love Cinema." Right? That is what it's about. You've said it. I'm actually going to clip that out and put that at the beginning of all of my videos now. That was majestic. So thank you. Just before you leave, Tony, can we get a little insight into what your next projects might be?
Oh, I've got so many. You know, I wrote a lot of scripts before I got this one made. And you know, they're still kind of on the table. I've just written a film called Bunny, which is another Welsh kind of kitchen sink supernatural. It's a sort of council estate ghost story. I want to try and make a ghost story feel real, if that's possible. And I've got a book which I've written called Hotel Ophelia, which is about a kind of a suicidal drifter who falls in love with objects instead of people, and he goes to a dilapidated hotel to kill himself. And once there, he falls in love with the inside of the room, and hence sparks another kind of weird, crazy, absurd story about kind of people falling through the cracks and people living at the fringes of society. So I'd love to make that. So many, Nico. We could spend another hour on the things that I'd like to do. I'm very grateful I got the opportunity to make this film, because films are really, really difficult things to make. In fact, they don't really want to get made. If the truth be known, you have to you have to wrestle them to the floor.
Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful note to end on. Guys, Protein is out now on Amazon and Apple. It's one of my top 10 movies of the year, and I don't really see that budging with the lineup of the remainder of the year. So please go and support fantastic independent cinema like Protein. Show the world why cinema like this is relevant and matters now more than ever. And please, if you do love the feeling of cinema and the magic of cinema, this is the channel for you. Subscribe right now. Tony, thank you so much for joining me here today on the channel. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me. You're a good man.
Really appreciate it, Tony.